Hey guys, Trainer DC here, coming at you with another video. When Pokemon Pokopia was first announced, it was a game that I had zero interest in. While I'm a huge fan of Pokemon itself, I've typically not been a big fan of the spin-off games. Yes, I've played Pokemon Tournament. Yes, I've played Pokemon Rumble, and while I love both of those games, I haven't been a huge fan of the other spin-off games that Pokemon has come out with through the years. I've played Mystery Dungeon, I've played Pokemon Ranger, but none of them were really my cup of tea. So Pokemon Pokopia just felt like another spin-off game that I would not be interested in, I would ignore and move on with my life. Well, it turns out that behind the surface of Pokemon Pokopia being this Minecraft-like game that has a much more cartoony art style than typical Pokemon, there's actually a rather deep and dark plot to the game that has kind of roped me back into it and made me very interested in the game, so much so that I've actually purchased it and started playing through it. So today in this video, I thought we'd take a quick look at the overview of Pokemon Pokopia's plot for those of you who maybe don't want to play the game because it's just not your cup of tea, or for someone who's just interested to see what this game has to do with the Kanto region and what exactly happened to the Pokemon world. Because if you guys don't know, Pokemon Pokopia takes place in a post-apocalyptic Kanto region after it's been destroyed by natural disasters, by climate change. So without further ado, let's get into this. So as I just stated a few seconds ago, this game is taking place in the Kanto region at an undisclosed period of time in the future after the region itself was destroyed by climate disasters. And not only the region itself, but the entire Pokemon world seemingly has been destroyed by climate change. It's never fully explained as to how the world was destroyed by climate change, like what was the direct cause of it. It's implied that it might be because of some legendary Pokemon. It's implied that it could be because of humans that caused this natural disaster, but it's never outright said what the direct cause of these natural disasters are. But eventually what happened over time is these natural disasters, this climate change, ended up making the Earth uninhabitable for humans. So what happens is humans decide to evacuate the Earth. Basically, with the help of Team Rocket, oddly enough, they build spaceships and launch into space with the plan to survive there until the climate crisis plays out and they can return to Earth when it's safe for them to live there. It's a rather dark plot, as I said before, for a Pokemon game, but you might be saying to yourself, Trainer DC, if the humans left the Earth, what happened to the Pokemon? Well, humanity basically decided that, hey, in order for us to survive, we're going to have to go into space, but we're not going to be able to bring all of our Pokemon with us. So they created what is called the Pokemon Conservation Project. And the Pokemon Conservation Project is essentially this plan to digitize all the Pokemon. Instead of abandoning them on the Earth, leaving them to perish, basically humanity decides to create this giant PC, so to speak, basically like the PC we have at the Pokemon centers, that can digitally store all the Pokemon in this global PC system. So basically the plan is, if we evacuate into space, we'll have all the Pokemon in this digital PC system, so they'll be safe. By the time the environment stabilizes, by the time the Earth becomes habitable again, we will come back and we will return to the Earth, freeing all of these Pokemon to rebuild the world, to rebuild society. Unfortunately, what happens is, over time, the world begins to collapse. You know, with the humans gone and with this climate disaster, cities decay, the power grids fail, we see buildings collapse, and just the entire nature of Pokemon gets destroyed, as you see in Pokopia. Part of the beginning of the game, you have to rebuild a Pokemon Center because it became destroyed over time, and obviously there's a mystery surrounding this world, and how exactly did it get destroyed, and where did the humans go? As time passed and the humans haven't come back to the Earth, we don't exactly know how long it's been, but it had to be a few decades to maybe even a century since the humans left the Earth. Pokemon slowly began to return to the wild. There's a document in the game that says how the person who created this Pokemon Conservation Project put a failsafe in that if no one's maintaining the program, eventually it's going to fail, and they don't want all the Pokemon to perish within the program. So if the system detects that a failure is coming, it will essentially release all the Pokemon back into the wild so they can survive in hopefully their natural habitats, and that's exactly what happened. Over time, Pokemon began to return to the wild, but as they soon learn with the wild areas that we see in Pokemon Pokopia, the world has really become a wasteland. There are many areas that are barren, the habitats of these Pokemon have been destroyed and fully collapsed, the ecosystem is unbalanced, so it's really not even hospitable for Pokemon, and the whole point of this game, the whole point of our role in this game as this Ditto, is to basically rebuild society, rebuild the world so we can restore the habits of all of these Pokemon and create a more peaceful ecosystem for them to survive and thrive in. At the end of the game, we end up launching a rocket into space, and during the credit scene, it actually reaches the humans, and we see a human interact with the rocket, which I'm very curious if that's going to end up setting up some future Pokemon game taking place in this destroyed Pokemon world, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, that's the plot of Pokopia. It's a really dark take on the Pokemon world, and is very surprising given the more cartoony art style that Pokopia has. I remember talking about this to friends and even showing it to my mom, and they were like, "You're gonna play this? This looks like a preschool game. Why are you gonna play this?" And it's funny because hidden behind that preschool-like aesthetic is a very dark and serious plot. The two things I do want to add on to the plot narrative that I just put out for you guys that I didn't talk about is obviously, as I said before, this game takes place in the Kanto region. What's really cool about this is a lot of the cities and towns that were within the original Kanto from the original Red and Blue are present within this game, but obviously in a destroyed state. So for example, the Withered Wastelands is Fuchsia City, Black Beach is Vermilion City, Rocky Ridges is Pewter City, Sparkling Skylands is set in a hybrid of Celadon and Saffron City, and then Pallet Town is obviously Pallet Town. It has the same name as it did in the original games, which is a really cool thing to be seeing. And obviously, as I mentioned before, how the ecosystem has collapsed and Pokemon are having trouble surviving in this post-apocalyptic world, we see that in the game with the various forms, with Mossy-Lax or Pikachu or Smearguru or the other variety of Pokemon forms that were introduced in this game. If you want to hear me go in depth on those, card above to that video. But yeah, again, this is a really dark and serious tone and just themes for a Pokemon game that has, again, a more cartoony aesthetic, and it really has reeled me into it and made me interested in playing this game, because this is something that I made a video recently talking about what we could see in a Legends Kanto game. I'll leave a card up above to it if you haven't seen it yet. This game's plot is strikingly similar to what I came up with for that Legends Kanto game. In that video, I was saying how we could see a Legends Kanto game far into the future where the Kanto region has drastically changed and maybe been destroyed. And my idea was inspired by a leak we had back in 2018 that Generation 8 was going to take place in a destroyed Kanto region 100 years in the future. And it's kind of crazy to see that that's exactly what Pokopia is. And I feel like this is the closest we've ever had a spin-off game come to being mainline Pokemon in terms of lore significance, because every Pokemon spin-off game we've gotten before really doesn't have any direct ties to the main series. Like you look at a game like Detective Pikachu, or like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, or even Pokemon Ranger, although that one is more closely aligned to regular Pokemon world than the other ones I've discussed here, but they really don't have direct ties to the mainline world of Pokemon. Like again, Pokemon Ranger, you could argue, okay, it takes place in a parallel space to that. You know, Pokemon Rangers appear in the Pokemon anime, which is obviously a representation of the games. So those are pretty close to taking place in the real world mainline Pokemon games, but we've never had a game that is so directly tied to mainline Pokemon in that this is taking place in the Kanto region, a region that is already established, but far into the future where the world has been destroyed by climate change, by this ecosystem failing due to these natural disasters. This is something that is honestly crazy to be seeing within a Pokemon spin-off game, and I have to wonder, from the Terra leak, we know that Pokemon Winds and Waves is going to have to do with a lot of sustainability goals just to keep the ecosystem in place and not have something like this happen in Pokemon Winds and Waves in whatever region that's going to be called. So it's very interesting to see that these two games tie into each other thematically, and I have to wonder if going past this, going forward into the next Pokemon game, Project Karasu, which is currently unknown to us, is this game going to tie directly into that game? Are we going to see maybe a post-apocalyptic Pokemon world in whatever Project Karasu becomes? I want to make a full video diving into that idea because I think it could be rather fun to dive down into that rabbit hole. But for now, the main point of this video was to go over the plot of Pokopia and how this is really a much more serious plot that is definitely being geared towards the core Pokemon fanbase in a game that I would argue is otherwise not being geared towards the core Pokemon fanbase. Like, I remember my friend, I texted him when I bought this game. I texted my friend Dom and I said, Dom, I caved, I bought Pokemon Pokopia, and he said, I'm really surprised to see you buy this because this type of game, this Minecraft-like Animal Crossing experience, it's not really my cup of tea. I've tried these games before. I played Minecraft a bit as a kid. I tried Tomodachi Life when it was out on the 3DS, and these games are generally not my cup of tea. I just don't really find enjoyment in them. But this game has grasped my attention and brought me in because of the plot of it alone, which I think think is rather ingenious, because this game is clearly meant for a more casual audience. But the fact of the matter is, by having this more dark and serious plot that is tied closely to the main series of games, it's going to draw in the core Pokemon fanbase to it, which just makes this game appeal to a wide variety of people, a wide audience, which in turn is why it's doing so well and why it's really the hot topic right now in the Pokemon world, in the Pokemon community. Like, I see more people talking about Pokopia right now than I do Pokemon Winds and Waves, which is kind of crazy for a game that was outsourced to Koei Tecmo, that's not even made internally by Game Freak. Like, this is really a game that has taken the community by storm, and deservingly so. Like, it's pretty fun from what I've played so far, and this plot is something that is definitely unexpected and definitely something that is really cool to see from the Pokemon franchise. Anyways, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think about all this. What do you guys think about Pokemon Pokopia? Have you played the game, or were you like me that when you saw it you really had zero interest in it, but after hearing what the plot is in this video, is it starting to reel you in, and are you starting to want to actually experience what Pokemon Pokopia has to offer? Let me know down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this from Trainer DC. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.